long as you love, you will see me in the stars. As you look up at the stars, I will be there.
I'm Monica Charette, and this is Holding the Light.
As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear. Little whispers you will hear. As long as you love.
In our last podcast, we talked about some of the things that carried our grieving family in the first days following the passing of my daughter, Cassidy. But what happens when those days become weeks, months, and years? I can tell you, it becomes even more difficult as we face our devastating reality of forever without our child. In part 2, my grief secretary tells us what it takes to be there for the long haul. I hope you find something that speaks to you if you are helping a friend along the grief journey. Today, we are holding the light once again with Dr. Stephanie Bartholomew. The first part of our conversation focused on the moments, the hours, days, and the initial weeks following the death of a child, and specific support that is helpful for families. So now we're going to dig in deeper into what it takes to be there for someone, truly be there for the long haul. The years and sometimes decades that follow, long after the funeral is over. So we're joined again with my friend, Stephanie Bartholomew, my grief secretary. We want to ask you, how do you think it's different, the grief support you provide initially versus the support that is needed 1, 2, even a decade later?
Well, there's the obvious. I couldn't come over for coffee every morning. and I laugh, but that was really hard for both of us. I was fortunate I had 10 days off after Cassidy died, and I was over here every morning with my notebook and our cup of coffee and doing our putting together what we needed to get done. And then we had the funeral. It was beautiful. We had a community that was helping everybody. Even you as a family were able to see, this love and support. And then everybody goes back to school, back to work, except you. You couldn't go back to work. Colby went back to school. I mean, most teens actually do go back to school. That normalcy kind of helps them, but I think it's really hard for parents. And it's one of those other things in America. There's no more traditions. It's like the funeral, which is still a whirlwind. Most people have to watch the video to remember really what happened. And then everything's gone. And I remember you saying, "Where's my grief secretary?" You would text me, and "I miss you." And I was like, "I miss you too." There's still so much to be done. And it really has got me thinking about a lot of different, nationalities that have different traditions around grief. And Colby and I were just talking about some of those. And in America, we don't. I remember a friend telling me that after they get together in one culture at 6 weeks and 6 months and 9 months, and there's certain foods you eat on those days and the way you dress on that day and this and that. And I remember you and I talking about that and said, you know what, that almost would be helpful just to kind of know that we're going to pay attention to grief today, all of you, because I'm living it every day, but you guys aren't. And it made me think about how to have traditions or the ways that we could show you as a friend that we still understand, even if we don't live it the same way. And the reality is that those that don't have that kind of grief so intimate, it will move farther and farther away, as the years go by. So it just made me think of what are the things we can do that just kind of show, what, I'm experiencing this holiday different than you, but I'm thinking about you.
I think that's great. Some practical things.
Yeah, some practical things to help us all remember. But again, it does come back to that your friends do think about you, and they do want you to know they're thinking about you. And it's a hard thing because if they're experiencing a joy during like a holiday or a prom or something like that, how do they reach out? And in a way that isn't just like, boom, look at how much fun we're having. and you're experiencing it so differently. So it's a hard thing, but that's what I thought I'd talk about as some of the ideas that we did. And then maybe you can share too whether they were helpful or what ones maybe weren't as much, or how can people think about during these different things in the many years ahead. So I'll just start going down my list.
Go right ahead. I think that's great.
I think, well, Christmas is a biggie, and that was a close holiday for you and for our community, where most people do celebrate Christmas in our Christian. And I think the first couple of Christmases, first of all, you can't just ignore it. It will come and it will happen. And I think that you felt like, can we just ignore this? But we couldn't ignore it, but we can do it different and give you permission to do it different and not try to push, where's your tree, Monica? Let me get you a tree. Let me do this, or why don't we do this? And I remember talking to some people, it's like, no, we can't force our Christmas traditions on, because they need something different this year. And the first year, our whole neighborhood went to the Humane Society on Christmas Day and cleaned and played with the animals, and it was fabulous. A few other Christmases, we went away or helped you find a place to go away. That was important for you to celebrate in someplace different. It just made it feel different.
Right.
And I remember helping you come up with ideas of where can you go spend Christmas this year. And a couple of those times we can come join you, in the evening for Christmas dinner, or maybe the next day, and do something different, with you. So finding ways to still celebrate that holiday, but it's a different way, and maybe you'll have traditions that come back that you used to have, when Cassidy was here, but maybe not. And I think we need to support families that way in being creative with new traditions.
Yeah, that was really helpful for us. We did struggle that first year. We did manage to put a tree up because we were just on autopilot and put it up and put these beautiful blue lights on it. And then I remember looking over at Colby and saying, why don't you go downstairs and get the ornaments? And I think he made it to the bottom of the stairs, but he came right back up and he said, we're not doing that. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. That first year, it's okay. And actually, I don't think we've taken them out since, and that's okay too, because you have to do what's right for you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Halloween. Halloween was a big holiday in our neighborhood. It was a big holiday for Cassidy and Colby. Your kids always had the most amazing costumes that, you helped or grandma made for them. And it was a big holiday, a fun holiday. So one of those where you recognize the absence, on that holiday. And the first Halloween, we said everybody's going to hang a blue light on their porch. And those stayed for years with blue lights in the porch. Blue became Cassidy's color, or was Cassidy's color. So we all put blue lights in. And even that was just like, oh, okay. Yeah, I know that everybody's trick-or-treating and they're doing what kids always do on Halloween, but I can look down the street and see blue lights are hanging out. So that's what I think about is I don't think friends have to give up, or they necessarily have to change all their traditions, but how can you bring in a grieving family who are still there, because it is reality. It's going to be Halloween, and you're going to have trick-or-treaters. Right. And Skittles candy. That was Cassidy's candy. So everybody knew they were going to get Skittles at the Charettes. That's right. And all the kids knew that. And that became a tradition. It's like, oh, we get Skittles because that was Cassidy's favorite candy. And how neat is that for those kids to learn that we can still celebrate Cassidy in a different way on Halloween.
I agree.
Blue ribbons. I don't even know when the blue ribbons started. But your mom made a bunch of blue ribbons for... I don't even know what the initial thing was, but now we just all have blue ribbons on our mailboxes.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that someone showed up with a giant blue heart, lighted blue heart that still is on the front of our house. But again, it's just something they felt like they could do to bring us some love. For Christmas, another thing we did that first year, and that has continued, was to celebrate a blue Christmas, which was not my idea. It's out there, and several different organizations and churches do it, but it gave me the idea of doing something for your family. And so I got hold of as many people as I possibly could. And on the solstice, which is the longest, darkest night of the year, right before Christmas, I asked everybody to just light a blue candle in and put it in your driveway. And I had a box out in my yard, said, you don't have to buy anything. You can stop by. I have everything right here. Here's the sand. Here's the tea light. Here's the little blue bag. And just go drop it off in Charettes. And most people got their own. They did not use what I provided, but that was just because we want to make it simple. And I don't know how many lights there were. We have a long driveway.
Over 100. I mean, easily over 100. There might have been 150 blue lights in your driveway. And and everybody in the neighborhood just said it was a different sense of, driving by your house that first Christmas and feeling just that sadness and that grief. And it's like, oh, the poor Charettes. There was something different about seeing all the lights. Like, oh, there's some light.
Yeah.
And, and it doesn't take away the grief, but it's just to show that there is some light around you, trying to hold you in this space. And that's, dropping a light off to somebody anytime is easy to do. Just to put a little candle, a little tea light out there. We did it as part of that Blue Christmas to light that dark day. But, I think that's an easy thing to do anytime you're thinking of somebody, is just drop off a candle or a light.
Yeah, there's no wrong words in that.
Nope, there's no wrong words. There's no misinterpretation, except let me give you some light. Mother's Day, we set out a big vase and just asked everybody to bring a flower by and just drop it in. And so you would have a big, beautiful bouquet on Mother's Day. Remembering, that one of your children wasn't, here on earth with you on Mother's Day. And friends of Cassidy still do make an effort on Mother's Day to send you a card or drop off a flower or just at least a text, and just to let you know that on Mother's Day they're thinking about you too.
Yeah, that's so meaningful. I think people should know that too. Just a message to somebody that I know it's Mother's Day and it's a hard day for you.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, every once in a while, once a year, there is National Siblings Day. And for some reason, everybody decides to post on Instagram their siblings for the first time that year. And it would be nice every once in a while if also people recognize those who have lost somebody close to them as a sibling. I know it's very difficult. There are adults in my life who are mentors to me who come up to me and they say, I'm so impressed with your strength. I lost a sibling too. And I say, well, why am I just hearing about this now? Like, who are they? Tell me about them. And let's celebrate them in any way we can.
That's a good point, Colby.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it doesn't take much just to say, hey, thinking about you today. Yeah.
Goes a long way.
Yeah.
Very long.
Anniversaries of the death, and I hate that term too, but I don't know if there is a better way out there. But, again, we can't ignore it. It'll be there. But trying to find a way to do something of goodness, on that day. Your family has often done something where you're doing some donations or doing some service work. For the first few years, we would serve ice cream after the soccer game. On that time of year, it was in the fall, and I think lots of her friends still will send you a picture. Eating dessert first today, and in your heart, what that means. It means that they're remembering that this is a hard day. Yeah.
Yeah.
Graduations, I think of when I think about she was in high school. So for kids in high school, what are different ways that they can, and many of them really do get onto this idea of I need to carry on and live my life partly for her. It's Cassie didn't get to do this. I need to carry her with me. And so all kinds of ideas, and certainly lots of schools do these, but I really encourage people to support those kids and, let it become their own idea. And sometimes they need help, though, because we don't do this very good in America. Some of them may have never witnessed or experienced a loss or seen somebody who's experienced a loss, so they don't know what's appropriate or not appropriate. And I guess when I talk to the kids, well, it's all appropriate. If that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. And, their soccer team, they did, they made some changes on their uniforms, so she was always with them. They had their team chant, with Shine On Cass. They lined up in the number 11, which was her number. On senior day, when she would have been a senior, she was still a part of that celebration, as were the parents. Were recognized as well. So they just still kept her a part of that team. They brought her jersey for the rest of her high school years along with them. And they talked about her a lot. And that's what's really neat is that I think in our community, we really gave people the permission to just keep talking. And it just doesn't happen that way in other communities where the kids can still will just keep talking about their friend that's gone.
Yeah. It's very healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I don't know if I ever told you this either. I think because it was not that long after Cassidy passed away, they were teaming up teams in Ferns I don't know, calculus class or something. and Fern didn't get a partner. There was an odd number. And I think somebody said, or maybe Cass had been her partner before or something. I don't know. And, Fern's like, oh, okay, great. Here I am having to do all the work again myself. And some of the students just looked at her. It's like, she's like, should I not have made that joke that, that Cassie was my teammate and now I'm gonna have to do all the work myself. And of course you guys know my daughter was not anything but just, and all those girls had a sense of humor too. And humor's okay too. Because most of the time it's a very endearing type of humor. And Cassidy had an incredible sense of humor.
Yeah.
She was always laughing and smiling. So I remember telling her, like, no, it's not inappropriate that you're laughing and smiling because that's, Cassidy would have been right there as part of that joke too, or whatever it was that you guys were laughing about.
That's the confusion around grief.
Yeah.
And somebody who loves to laugh myself, and oftentimes in places where I should not, I think that's exactly when you should. I think oftentimes that is exactly what is needed.
Mm-hmm. Graduations, the kids all wore something that memorialized Cassidy, a button with her picture on it, or decorated their cap in honor of her, and to bring her with. Many of the students, when they traveled, would take photos and send them back to you, with their Cassidy button or their Cassidy T-shirt or wristband. And those are all just lovely ways to say, you know what, I'm blessed. I'm traveling the world. I'm graduating college. But you know what? I'm taking Cassie with me, and there are ways to say, we know you aren't having these same experiences, but we want you to know we're thinking about you and sharing and bringing Cass with.
We do love that. I was thinking the other day, because I know so many other moms who have lost children, unfortunately, but one in particular who has a child that passed at a much younger age. And she said to me, I've loved seeing how Cassie's friends memorialize her, and I'm so worried that there's going to be so much time between the time that her son died and when that class will graduate and get married and have children, that they will no longer do that. And that's every parent's real concern, is that you'll forget your child. You'll forget my child, rather.
Yeah. The in the neighborhood, we've done a neighborhood parade. I think we started this with COVID, actually, because we were, something we could do outside and still get everybody. So we do a neighborhood parade and collect goods for the local food shelter, and it's great for the little kids to get involved and in the whole neighborhood. And it's something Cassidy did. So that came off because Cassidy, one time took her wagon around and collected, goods. So, it was a great idea to let's do this. Cassidy would have loved this or does love this. And this is so part of her. And now it's tradition. It's like we're having the neighborhood parade.
They look forward to it every year.
They look forward to it, yeah. Snow days. Remember the snow sculptures? I remember, and snow days out here. I have lots of pictures of snow days when the girls would all get together and play out in the snow. And I remember one snow day we came and made a snow sculpture in your front yard. Shine on Cass, or things like that. So I don't know. I think my advice is just be creative, and it doesn't require money at all, but just sharing your life with you guys, and in a way that I think, and it's hard too for kids to say, well, gosh, I'm graduating. Is this going to hurt when I share, look at me, I'm graduating and thinking about Cass, or I know prom, prom was a hard one. And it was a really tough one because she was a junior, so, how do you have fun yet recognize, one of your best friends isn't there and you want to honor there. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It's hard to read, but I think it's just recognizing, just saying her name, and, Cassidy would love this, or talking about when she did, dress up. It's like, oh, Cassidy looks so beautiful at homecoming. So, so finding opportunities to still tie in the wonderful memories that, you do have with her, even though you won't have the same ones going forward, is this idea of, carrying somebody that you've lost, carrying them with you.
Yeah. You touched on something, when sharing those things and as part of your everyday life. What do you think the role that social media plays in this now? It's a totally different world than when you and I were in high school.
It is a totally different world, yeah. Right from the get-go. I mean, right after Cassidy died, I remember some of my grief secretary work was like, no, we're not going to look at that page. We're not going to look at that page. It was such a public event or a public tragedy. So part of it was also, what do we not need to be seen? Mm-hmm. Mostly, I think it's good, like everything with social media. It can be used appropriately. I think it's amazing how people who are experiencing grief use social media. I say you post and write as much as you want. This is a wonderful outlet that they just did not have before. So if you want to talk about her, you can just put something out on social media. And people love hearing that and seeing that and thinking about you. And that's entirely different than, picking up the phone and talking to somebody and still sharing. So I think it sounds like a neat opportunity for people who are grieving. I think it's a way for people to help share how they're carrying casts forward, sending the pictures and where they're traveling the world and have their cast bracelet or this or that. So, but it really has changed things.
It has. I think it's part of their healing process, too, to be able to share the ways they miss her, the way they remember her. And when you lose a child like that, I think that everyone's looking for that. As far as for myself, I want to be able to mention that social media has offered me an opportunity to share with other mothers my journey, my grief journey. And there are several out there, and we'll make sure we include them in the show notes. But one in particular is Maine Angel Moms, that is specifically for women, moms who have lost a child in the state of Maine. And I've connected with so many amazing human beings that, only they can share what you're feeling and understand it as closely as they can. So it's been a great resource. So I think in that regard, social media has been very helpful.
That's wonderful. And it's one of those things, too, that you have to give yourself time. I remember right after Cassidy died here, you telling me, here in your house, like, I don't want to talk to somebody else who's lost their child. It was that, no.
So personal.
Too personal. Nobody can feel what I feel now, and certainly none of us could. And every situation is different. But it's so wonderful to hear that these support groups do find their ways, and hopefully that's hope for people who are very early in their grief process and can't ever see that piece of light that they might have, that it still may come. It doesn't replace anything. It's just a little bit of light there, maybe.
And some people want that support right away. I've had people reach out to me within days after they've lost a child. How are you doing this? What would you recommend? How can you help me? And I'm glad that there are resources for them. Because every loss is different.
What do you think has been the from friends who have not experienced loss and they use social media, what do you think has been the most helpful things that you see people share?
Well, so for me personally, like I mentioned earlier, like celebrations are absolutely first and foremost. Memories, photos, things that maybe haven't been shared before are the most personal for, I think, everybody who's also sharing in this grief process. And also on positives, it's about recognition sometimes. Public recognition is helpful just to make sure that you're known, that you're seen. It doesn't need to be this big, exploitative, this is this person, look what they've gone through. But in some way, shape, or form, just say, I remember. Like, I know that this person is. And in terms of don't do nothing. Like, that's the worst part. My mom and I were just talking about this. And I blame myself a little bit, but she mentioned this is the first Easter that nobody said anything, and I blame myself too. But I only had one National Siblings Day where anybody said anything, and there was like 60 or 70 people, and I was just a kid, so I turned my phone off, and that kind of became a habit. I just didn't want to deal with it. But now I'm a little older and more equipped to deal with it, and now I just see everybody else celebrating the people they care about, as they should. But every once in a while, it would just be very helpful sometimes to just have a wind beneath my wing a little bit. Yeah.
I think probably the most helpful thing for me on social media, or anywhere for that matter, is when people at least try to understand. I know they can't, but there's something so meaningful when someone says, I just read something about this, or I just talked to someone else who had a similar experience, and while I don't know how you're feeling, and I did not have the same relationship that you had with your child, and I mean this from other parents who have lost children, that they can admit that, but but I'm here for you. I see you and I hear you, and I know I can't imagine how you're feeling or what you're experiencing, but I just want you to know that I'm still here. It's so important.
Yeah, I think it's important too, as the friend, to share the fears you have too, or even just, I think I remember sometimes shortly after saying, I was like, I just can't believe that we're never going to touch her again. Those kind of thoughts that come in mind, to go ahead and share those really hard, sad thoughts too. It's not like everybody in the room isn't having them.
Right.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when we're, supporting or with somebody, we're trying to kind of keep them from their sorrow too much, instead of just saying, oh my gosh, I don't, that must be so hard. You're never going to touch her again, or whatever, those moments that I was like, I can't ever understand that, except to just say, like, wow, I can never believe how that could feel.
It's one of the most stranging and isolating experiences that we all experience at some point in our lives, but don't share it. Yet we have this incredible infrastructure in front of us to do just that. I mean, that's what it is. Share, retweet, repost, do it. We're all experiencing so much all at once, all the time, and we have the ability to come together as a community, and we oftentimes don't do that. And community is the big thing. I think sometimes social media is perceived as this global concept, but it can be so radically used to unionize individuals that you don't bump into, but they only live a quarter mile down the road.
Yeah.
And yet you can bring everyone together in this one area, in this one space, to share thoughts and to really form a concrete structure, a society in its own little bubble.
Yeah.
Just to share love with each other.
Yeah. It also kind of made me think of, for different people who experience it differently. And, I think of Randy, Cassidy's dad, because he's much more of an introvert and holds his feelings inside. And yet I was so happy still to see, Cassidy's friends will still go and hug him and not be afraid to, and he's gotten some tears once in a while, and he turns away. But, it just reminds me too of, you don't want to make anybody uncomfortable, but some people can't ask for it. And that doesn't mean they still don't need it. They might not ever be on social media. They might not, cry publicly, and they do deal with it differently, and then that's okay too. But that doesn't mean that a hug, when you're talking about Cassidy, to that family member or any family member, is it should still happen.
And for someone like my dad, who I know quite personally, for him it's very uncomfortable. But in all things in life, the most important and the most valuable things oftentimes come with a little bit of uncomfort in order to get there. And he's expressed that to me, and I know wholeheartedly that those soccer players and those classmates of Cassidy that treat him like family mean the world to him, and he loves them endlessly and appreciates that they express that to him.
Mm-hmm. That's just an important point, that people grieve differently. So important, but they all need support.
They grieve differently, but they still need, they need your love and support, and
Agreed. Well, life does move on, and the reality especially is hard for people, I think, who have lost a child, watching everyone else around and looking on with hope for the future. And so, when a part of your future is gone, how do you think friends find a balance between recognizing and respecting this reality, and then also helping them find the space for joy again? That's such a difficult struggle for grieving parents and siblings.
Yeah. I think one is just recognize the reality. This is the reality. The rest of your life, this is the reality. And so recognizing that reality, that it wasn't just this time in high school, recognizing the reality, and, as you said, saying her name, sharing, as often as you can. And I imagine it gets harder and harder as time goes on, because people do kind of forget, or maybe they feel like, they're doing great. Isn't it, wonderful the Shretts were able to get away for Easter or for a holiday or something. And, so you feel that they don't need you, your friends don't need you. And that's true in one sense. You don't need them the same way,
Right.
the first year. But it's that intentionality of, and maybe you put a reminder. Maybe put a reminder in your phone or something. I know I've done that with other families, just to remind me to send that card to a family or something. Or thinking about those ways of, as you get farther and farther away from that grief. I was remembering just now a dear friend of ours, Rebecca, how she would she actually kept notes. She would write little notes to so many people, but she actually kept a list of who she was going to write a note to and remind herself, I'm going to write, I just talked to Stephanie. She would actually go home and write a note to Stephanie in 3 months. And it's like, and that didn't depersonalize it to me at all, that I got a note. It was, remember her thinking at that time, whatever our conversation was, you know what, I think it's going to be important for her to hear from me in 3 months, or I want her to know I'm praying for her in 3 months. And when I think about how amazing she was in dropping notes for people when you least expected it, but most needed it always, that, I've been thinking that myself, is that, maybe that's what we need to do as friends, supporting people, because we will forget that grief because we didn't experience it the same way. And, how to give ourselves reminders, or also just, probably it's not even that we don't think about it, but it's that whole idea of like, oh, I'm glad they got away and are having fun. Okay. Now say something. do it. The grief never goes away. So, yeah, I think we just need to always remember that it is a reality, and it's never, ever, ever wrong to just say thinking about you. Or
Yeah, and if they think that it's going to make you sad to bring up your child's name, they should know that I can never be more sad than I am every day. I am actually happier when you mention her name or share her story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely something that I have learned through this process is about how important it is to always, talk about Cassidy and share her life, and learning too, as I talk to other families who've gone through grief, it's like, like Colby had said earlier, like I've found out other people that have lost children or brothers or sisters, like I didn't have any idea. Oh no, we always have a chair at Christmas for my brother Joe, and this and that, and it's like, it's some families but some families you don't, and I think it's maybe they choose that, but most likely it's not that they chose that. Most likely they've just gotten used to living that way because the people aren't there right in the grief, are not talking about him or her every day. But it is one of the things I've learned about how incredibly powerful that is and important that is forever.
I think we've all learned a lot in this process that we wish we'd never gone through together. And I'm grateful that there are people like you that exist to help other people. And it's why we're doing this podcast. I think it's really important. There's lots of people out there who are feeling like, am I the only person feeling this way? And helping friends help their friends through the grief process is a big part of that. And I think you have provided some really good information and some very compassionate thoughts and ideas for people. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and I appreciate you and love you as a friend.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And Stephanie, as always, you are the most, how do I put this? You have this concept of the capacity that the community has to give back. And not only that, you've envisioned so many creative and innovative ways to support a family in need. And we are, I don't want to say indebted, but we are in so many ways thankful and inspired by all of your actions and what you've been able to do to help us through this process. So thank you for sharing everything that you've been able to do and giving so many other people who have or certainly might at some point go through this process and now hopefully have some tools and the capacity to serve their community and their friends and their family through this.
It's been my pleasure, and I hope it does. I hope it does help other people. We just need to be talking about dying more. We need to be talking about grief more, and just it needs to be so much more normalized. That it's tragic enough the way it is, that much less when we kind of don't let the human connections be part of the healing.
And this is what it's like to be the grief secretary.
As long
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please share our link with others and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. I'm Monica Charette, reminding you that you are never alone in your grief. Until next time, we'll be right here with you, holding the light.
As long as you love,